what I want to move on to is today's virtual hot seat. And this one, I guess in line of what we've been talking about actually is quite an interesting one, because I think that what this is all about. So let me just sort of bring this one up here. So this is coming from we don't know the context of the business or anything, but it's quite a good one because it's a fairly sort of generic one. But it's my current challenge is that we've grown our team remotely over the last 6 months, so our staff management is getting harder to do. How do I keep my staff happy, performing? What should I do when things go wrong? How should I measure performance? All that kind of thing, because I'm starting to feel things are getting a little bit out of control. What do you think about when you hear that?
I think that's one of the most common challenges we had over the last 15 months, given the COVID and everything and the rapid change and the impact it had on people. I don't think there's any manager, sales or non-sales, that did not ask this question to themselves. And honestly, this is if they didn't, they definitely should, because life changed drastically, right? I was reading an HR article actually last week, which is very timely in this context. People working remotely, their motivation drops 17 points. 17 points is a huge difference. The difference is equal to working for a company that's best in that industry from a culture perspective versus the worst in that industry from a culture perspective. So suddenly you may have been the best manager, you may have had the best team that has the highest engagements, and now, they drop to something that's like the worst. And this is something that you did not do wrong or anything. So we all need to build a different approach. Let me give my perspective from IBM side, and then let me give my personal opinion about what I'm doing with my team. Because again, this is the same question I'm asking myself. From an IBM perspective, one thing we did well, I think, when everything started was we had a pledge that our some peer executives as well as HR department created, and this is about first and foremost the people side of the equation, because people working remotely with kids at home, they have different priorities, they have different challenges. You need to understand that, when you have a video conference meeting like this, in a way you're a guest in their house during that time period. You need to have that attitude, you need to act accordingly. You need to understand that they'll have different priorities throughout the day, that they need to take care of their kids maybe during the day now, and they can work instead in the evenings. You need to show that flexibility. You need to show that you're there for them. Before any of this, you need to ask the questions, how they're doing and how things are working. And this has one professional aspect for sure, but also the personal aspect, because people have different things that they're dealing with when they're working remotely now, especially with the last year.
That's huge, isn't it? That whole sort of shift in, I think I've been saying that this sort of thing is I couldn't believe that people were still getting on a train and commuting 2 hours in and 2 hours out to work every day. I've fortunate enough been remote for 5 years now, and we built the office in the garden and stuff like that, so we have that separation. But if it was to be thrust on me, I can only imagine how difficult that was. And I think that, and I've heard like on the other side of the coin, like horror stories of people that are literally locked in their house and dealing with 3 children of different ages, with a partner at home as well, and all the rest of it. And their manager or their boss or whatever have then come down very, very hard on them and said, you're not performing, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And one story that I heard was from my wife, and she said that one of her friends, it happened to them, and she literally had to, in the middle of one Zoom meeting, when she got called out for something, she just went, right, turned the computer around and showed the chaos that was going on with the kids in front of them and said, this is what I'm dealing with. It's like, not to have that empathy is incredibly naive, I think.
Absolutely.
Verging on psychotic, I think, like, to not understand that 100%. Is a reality for people. And so I think you're right. It starts with the people, and also the empathy and the understanding of the new situation, and that you have to be flexible.
Absolutely. Then the second biggest mistake to avoid, I would say, is we have this management approach that we built over, again, decades, that's really strictly sticking to certain checklists. We are asking people to do certain activities to get the end result, which, again, is great and helpful in certain cases. But in an environment where people have much less motivation than they did, the moment you push a checklist to people, that's all they're going to focus on. They're going to just check the box, move on to the next task and check the box and move on to the next. You're not going to get the end goal, though. If people have the minimum motivation only to get you, out of their bag, that's not going to deliver the results you need. So the discussion becomes, how can you convert that conversation to something where they share ownership as you do on delivering that result? The way you can approach this is, there are great articles, great tools, great processes, but in simple terms, the way to approach this is, structure your week. Set Mondays a discussion together as a team where you talk about the commitments for that week and how you're going to get to those commitments. And you need to ask that how question to people instead of saying, here's the checklist I need you to get done. But give them the flexibility to define how they're going to get there themselves. Then keep them accountable to that, but give them the flexibility to define it. And then give them the flexibility to execute on that based on their own timing, given what's happening at their house, as we already mentioned. Then from Tuesday till Thursday, try to set only individual conversations, like talk to them, try to get an understanding about where they are, how they are doing with the stretch assignments, not to, investigate, not to look everything with a microscope, but sincerely, seriously asking how and where you can help them, because by design, some of the tasks they will have will be stretched. That's why you're the manager. That's why they work for you. And you need to have some added value proposition that you're bringing to the table. But keep those discussions more individualistic and more individual, unless there's a task you will accomplish as a team together working on something. Then Fridays, use that in a way that you kind of reflect. We committed this, here's where we are, and this is where we get to. But don't do it in a way that, again, you're inspecting or you are the one saying how the hell you didn't get to where you need to get to. Put the people on the spot in the sense that, let them present to the team. And if somebody's pitching to the team something on Friday, they'll do their best to look better. They'll do their best to look the best they can throughout the week just to get there and be successful. This is simple, basic human attitude we all have. So we need to empower the people to define, again, what they are going to get done that week and how they're going to get there, and then help them along the week. And then at the end of the week, just make them communicate this to their peers more than you. And one, it will help with hearing from each other why they struggle, why they succeed. So there'll be best practice sharing, which is always important, especially in this age where they cannot chit chat on the coffee table or next to the water cooler. You need to enable that. Then the last piece that I would suggest is try to create some time for people to socialize. It is very hard these days, but it can be a pizza party, it can be virtual happy hours, but try to do something that's a bit more fun, where you create a bit of a teaming culture, and the second one, again, people to connect with each other, because again, we work with people. We work with each other in the team, we work with our managers, and the more personal level we have a relationship, the better, the easier. Of course, we need to be, again, conscious about people's lives at home and how things are going, and they may or may not be able to join these kind of things. But it's good to have these kind of activities that brings people together out of the work context day in and day out, because there's something called, Zoom fatigue for a reason. We are always working now. We're always at home and available, and there's the balance we need to somehow establish. That will be the last tactical piece.
Yeah, and I picked up on the word that you used there that I think is it kind of underlines all of this, and it's culture. And I know culture will mean a number of different things to different people, but I think if I ever sort of think back to times when I was in, working in businesses and all the rest of it, there was a definite sort of type of culture. And I think that when it's good, it's almost like the culture doesn't matter quite as much when times are good and all the rest of it. And you can manage your stuff because everyone is seeing benefits and all the rest of it. Things are good, everyone's happy. But when things turn a little bit south, the culture will have a massive impact on how people react. And I think that culture, it always does start from the top. It starts from the leadership sort of communicating the vision, what is expected, and not just from a performance basis, but from a behavior basis, from how you treat each other in the team, how you treat your customers, how you treat your suppliers, how you treat basically everyone that comes into contact with the business. It's not about perks. It's not about, getting ping pong tables in the office or anything like that, or, sending, I don't know, ping pong balls to people's houses so they can ping pong through Zoom. I don't even know if that's possible, but who knows? It's about that cultural thing. And that starts at the hiring process. And it's a much more difficult thing to change mid-flow, but the only time to sort of grow an oak tree is 80 years ago, but the best time is today. So it's kind of like, if you're starting to see things going a little bit awry, have you questioned whether or not, as a leadership team or a leader, whether you have really communicated the expectations and the vision of the culture of the business? Because that still needs to go through even when you're remote.
Absolutely. And one common mistake we all do is, when things are rough, we stick to our playbook harder. We stick to things we do, that got to us.
That we're comfortable with, and we know, and we understand, right?
And we force it more, we push for it more, we push for those things more. The thing is, though, you need to take the step back, somehow calm yourself first before even engaging the team, and figure out how we can approach this holistically, how we can approach this more productively. As you said, the best time is today. It may take 8 years for certain things, but it doesn't matter. You take that step back, saying, what are the things we can do differently? And don't expect you have all the answers. You need to be open and transparent with the team and let them come up with the answers. Again, the more you give your ownership to people in this age, the better, because you're not in the same office. You're not going to see what they're doing already day in and day out. And it's simple number one management advice. Like, if people feel ownership, they're going to come up with the solutions. They're going to feel ownership to execute, and they're going to get that. If you give them the recipe of success, saying, here's the checklist, check the boxes, that's all they're going to do. They're going to check the boxes, nothing more, nothing less, and that's not going to deliver the results you need.
And I think one of the other things I always used to do when I was running teams is you kind of give the people that are working in whatever role they're working in, you give them a number of success metrics. We might call them KPIs or something like that. But it's kind of like, if you can give them some key things to monitor on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, they will know whether they're doing a good job, like performance-wise. It never becomes, you never get into a review meeting with someone when you have those success meetings, and then you have to have a hard conversation and it becomes a surprise.
Absolutely. And you need to talk the same language, right? You need to agree on what the success looks like, and you need to have the hardcore numbers for that, because this is sales. It's all about the numbers at the end of the day. But
it might look slightly different with different departments or different roles or anything, but each of those will have a success metric. Like, from the person that answers the phone, like the average answer time is, 2 rings. That's a success metric. Like, that has to be done all the time. If you run the front office, or, when you did have the front office, things have to be, pristine for people to walk in, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's just those sorts of things. I don't know, like, it doesn't have to be all about hard sales or revenue metrics, because not everyone is going to be necessarily linked to that. But it's, I should still always try and link it back to customer success anyway. But that's just how I look at it.
Yes, you need to look at your net promoter score, you need to look at your revenue metrics at the end of the day. But absolutely, there are millions of things that needs to happen. I'm looking at this more from a sales perspective, of course, as you can imagine, being into this too much. But for every single department, that's the case. You need to have that outcome that you're looking for and help people be clear on the outcome you expect. Then let them somehow define how they can get there. If they think there's a better way to keep that front desk pristine, the lobby much cleaner and nicer, then let them do it that way. Keep them accountable if it is not, but just give them the flexibility once you define the success metric.
Definitely. Well, I mean, there's I hope a lot of practical ideas in there, but also a lot of things to maybe think of from I guess a slightly bigger perspective as well, thinking the cultural side of things, but the practical side of things that you can do in there. Take some of those steps. And I love the whole thing about sort of structuring a week around how you communicate with your team and the things that you do with your team, and making extra time potentially for your team. I think that's fantastic advice. So I do hope that's been helpful, not just for who sent it in, but also people listening.